I'm Mike McMullen. I'm president of the Carroll County Chamber of Commerce. Welcome today. And as is our custom, our chair of the board usually conducts how the meeting goes, acts as the MC. So I would like to introduce to you Miss Lori Blake, who is the chair of our board. This is her first meeting starting now. She's all through the whole year. Lori is the HR director for Fuchs North America, located in Owings Mills, coming soon to Carroll County, Hampstead. So we're happy to have Lori on board. Lori, you've been on the board with the chamber for how long? 5 years when she was with the Times. Well, now she's here. I'd like for you all to give her a nice round of applause, Miss Lori Blake.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Mike. I'm very proud to be serving as the chair of the board this year. And thank you all for coming today. I trust that you're all enjoying your lunch. It was a great lunch, thanks to the Best Western. Today is our annual Carroll County Budget Luncheon, and you will be hearing shortly from Mr. Ted Zaleski. He's the Director of Management and Budget for Carroll County. He's been graciously providing informative insights into the county budget to chamber members for years, and we look forward to hearing what he has to say. He's been doing this now for 13 years. Long time. Thanks, Ted. Thanks. So, we also want to thank the Community Media Center. They're streaming live today, so thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. So, allow me to introduce our two sponsors who will be speaking during the program. Please stand to be recognized. First, we have Sherry Crasium-Bolin. She's tax partner for Reger, Liegeman & Hauk, a Carroll County Chamber member for 62 years. Yeah. That's great. Thank you. Next, we have Dave Peliquin, and Dave is president of Main Street Advisors, a Carroll County Chamber member for 15 years. I would like to recognize at this time the elected and appointed officials with us today. First, we have Westminster Mayor Kevin Utz, Commissioner Steve Wance, Commissioner Dennis Frazier, Mayor of New Windsor Neil Roop, and Sheriff Jim DeWeese. From the Board of Education of Carroll County, we have Board of Education President James Dolan. Jim. Board Member Devin Rothschild. And Board Member Bob Lord. Also with us today, we have Superintendent of Carroll County Public Schools, Mr. Steve Guthrie. Oh, he's taking a phone call, okay. We'd also like to recognize Dr. James Ball, President of Carroll Community College. Have I missed anyone? Anyone in the room that I've missed? Okay, good. Okay, will the former chairs of the Chamber of Commerce Board please stand to be recognized? First, we have Dave Bollinger of Barnes Bollinger Insurance, Steve Wance of Carroll Community College, and immediate past chair, Mike Fox of Lehigh Cement. If you are a member of the current Board of Directors, please stand to be recognized. Today's corporate sponsors are Reger, Liegeman & Hauk and Main Street Advisors. Our first sponsor's message will be delivered by Sherry Crasium-Bolin with Reger, Liegeman & Hauk. Sherry?
Thank you. Good afternoon, and I have been giving a very, very strict time limit. Thank you, Mike. So keep this brief. But Regular Lehman and Houck has been very, very proud to sponsor this particular event for many, many years. I know myself personally, I've been coming for 5 or 6 years, and I've always enjoyed Ted's very informative information that he gives us every year. It's very important, and the whole firm feels that way. Personally, I just want to, on a personal note, let everybody know that I've been with Regular Lehman and Houck for 12 years, a little over 12 years, not 62. So, but the firm has been a member of the chamber for 62 years. We started out in Westminster. We have 3 offices, in case you're not familiar, one in Hanover, Pennsylvania, one in Frederick, Maryland, as well, of course, here is on Main Street in Westminster. Since my 12 years were spent in the first 12 years here in Hanover, and recently this past July, I took the opportunity to come here to our Westminster office. And so far, I'm really getting to know the area a little better, and I'm really enjoying it. So please stop in, say hi. Always happy to get to know everybody and the businesses in the community. I just want to turn you real quick to a couple of things that we left for you on your seat. In our folder, this lovely folder we provided, there's a couple of things in here I just want to turn your attention to, our firm profile and some things. You will find that we have our monthly e-newsletter printed for you in there, just to give you an example. And there is this nifty little card in here. This is kind of important. If you're interested in receiving these, and we do not blast you with all kinds of junk mail, but we do send out a very informative monthly e-newsletter to all of our clients and other people that we know are interested. So if you're interested in that, please go ahead and fill this out. And you can leave it here, return the slip to one of us. There's several of us in the room, Ryan Hastings, Wanda Lynn, and Harriet Gillen, I know are here today, or myself. And just one brief thing quickly, because this has been in the news quite a bit lately, would be IRS and tax fraud. I don't know how many of you might have been hearing about this on the news recently. TurboTax was in the news about such a thing, and some of the states had shut down because they were receiving fraudulent returns through their system. Not necessarily their fault, but they had to get some things in place. But the IRS has been seeing more and more of this over the last couple of years, and I know personally I've seen a few of our own clients and other family members who have been affected by that. The IRS is still trying to grasp with that and are really struggling with it. But if you have any kind of suspicious activity, if you have yourself been maybe involved in something like you have your insurance records or something like that have been compromised, it's very advisable to go in. There is a form you can fill out, and you can get a special ID number through the IRS that kind of links you to that tax return so that somebody else cannot electronically file a return with your personal information on it and get a fraudulent refund. So it's something I wanted to bring to your attention because I've had quite a few people contact us about that. I think that I'll keep that as it. So thank you very much for your attention, and please let us know if we can help anybody out in any way. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry, and thanks for your support of the chamber. Our next sponsor's message will be given by Dave Peliquin, President of Main Street Advisors, LLC. Dave.
Good afternoon, everyone. I get up here every year, I guess the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm not saying I am doom and gloom about budgets. I'll leave that to Ted. But I do tell people all the time, you want to work with an investment advisor that's got your best interests. The best way to do that is to have only 100% of their revenues come from your fees you pay them. That's called fee only. You can look us up on the web at mainstreetadvisors.com. It's MAINSTADVISORS. Some people spell out street and then say, I can't find you. You can also Google fee-only investment advisors, Carroll County, Westminster. You can Google my name if you can spell it. The message I would leave you with is we manage about $43 million for about 130 clients. They're all people like all of you seated in the room. Probably the average age is 60, 55 or 60. People who are 45, 50 and over, you're in a different environment than you were 10 and 20 and 30 years ago, not just because you're 55, 60, 65, but because you don't have you have very little time to accumulate much more than you have already. And my message to people is we've never, in the history of the world, had so many governments responsible for so much with so much debt. And I know I sound like a Jeremiah, whether it's a town, a county, a state, a country. You've heard about Greece. I follow that stuff every day. In case you're thinking, God, that stuff's so boring, don't worry, this guy reads about that. But the message I give you is not that the world's going to end, it's that you can't be taking the same level of risk you were comfortable with when you were in your 30s and 40s doing the 80s, 90s, and parts of the aughts. So if you've got an investment advisor now, be sure you're on the same page with them, like, hey, what happens if this and what happens with that? How much risk am I taking? You should be able to ask them any question in the world, from why not invest in this, why invest in this, what about gold, what about managed futures, what about things that I read about and then you always tell me they're not for me, maybe they are, or at least know what the alternatives are out there. Because I promise you the hedge funds, the pensions, the endowments are investing very differently than you probably are. And for example, Yale's endowment is 6% long US stocks. You could ask yourself, really? Well, it wasn't that way 20 years ago. Why is it that way now? So on that note, Ted's going to give a resounding positive story about the state of the county's finances. He is a great guy, and you know what? If you ever get into a conversation with Ted about the budget, you'll feel like you're talking to your spouse because he knows the budget of the county so well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the moderator, and then I guess we'll listen to Ted. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dave. We appreciate your support of the chamber. I didn't mention earlier, but if you would make sure that you silence your cell phones or turn them off so that we don't interrupt the program, we would appreciate it. If anyone is interested in sponsoring an event, we have a few remaining sponsorships this year, so please see Mike McMullen today before you leave. He'll let you know what's available. So now let's begin our program. I'm sure most of you know Ted Zaleski as Carroll County's Director of Management and Budget. Ted is responsible for the budget, grants, and risk management functions, and is also a major resource to the Chamber and to the rest of the community. Ted lives in Carroll County, just outside of Westminster, and today Ted will talk about the issues involved in the county's fiscal year budget 2016 and beyond, and then we'll take our questions. Please help me in welcoming Ted.
Last thing Mike just said to me was, only good news, Ted. And I disappoint him so many times. You know, I know Dave Peliquin's wife, and I'm sitting there trying to think what she would think about that comparison he just made about talking to Ted is like talking to your spouse. Yeah, look out around the room. It's remarkable to me that this many people come to hear me talk. You know, if my kids were here, they'd probably be saying, people actually paid to sit there and listen to you talk. And you know, former Commissioner Roush is here, and he could have easily said, I don't have to listen to Ted anymore, but he's here. And two of my current board are here, so I haven't pushed them to the point of please no more. Oh yeah, and Bob Lord's here now on the Board of Education. I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, but there's a point in the budget process where I do 5 meetings around the county, go to each one of what are now the commissioner districts to share, oh, am I too far away? To share the commissioner's proposed budget and let people ask questions, make comments. And Bob went to all 5 of those meetings. And I think it was probably the last one. He said, I've been listening to you very carefully. I've been waiting to catch you say something different one time than you did another time. But I don't think he caught anything. I stayed pretty consistent in my message. You know, so it has been 13 years that I've been doing this. I've seen 3 chamber directors, 4 boards of commissioners. And as I was preparing for this, I went back and I was looking back through notes from other sessions that I did, and I was thinking, boy, we've just been through so much. So many things have changed. The very first one was the fiscal year 04 budget, and we were emerging from a recession back then, and the outlook for the county at the time was pretty bleak. But we did emerge from the recession. We eventually recovered at the county. And more. We ended up having a number of very strong years, booming economy, booming housing markets. But even at that, those years served to solidify my Mr. Doom and Gloom reputation, because I kept telling people, well, just remember, it's good, but it's not going to stay this way. Things are going to change. And I was right. The boom didn't last. But not only didn't it last, but we went through, and in some ways are still going through, more difficult years than anything we've ever experienced. We've had nothing even remotely like this to say, well, it's kind of like that other time. Now, I take no credit for having predicted what we've just been through, because I didn't. I fully expected a downturn, but I had no idea what was going to happen to us. And we spent years, truly chasing the dollars downward, trying to figure how far can this go? How bad can this get? Just to give you one sense of just how big the change was, all of our significant revenues, and when I say significant, I'm talking about revenues all the way down to 0.5% of our budget. Every single one of those declined in dollars. And I'm not talking about lower rate of growth. I'm saying fewer dollars than we were getting previously. Fortunately, they didn't all decline at the same time. That would have been incredibly difficult for us to deal with. And since that time, our operating budget, since fiscal year 9, our operating budget on an average annual basis has grown less than 1%. So we've been pretty much standing still for about a half a dozen years. And back on that idea of revenues, property tax, recordation tax, highway user revenue, all three of those, when we're looking ahead to fiscal year 16, will still be $10 million lower than they were at their peaks in various years. Our investment income will be $7 million lower next year than it was at its peak. Many of our budgets during that same time period have been flat, or in fact, even today, are smaller than they were back in fiscal year 9. And I'm not going to get into a lot of details, but just give you a few things to give you a sense. Carroll County Public Schools, which is by far the biggest thing that we fund, fiscal year 9 to fiscal year 15, county funding to the school system has grown $1.3 million. HSP, or Human Services Programs, I just grabbed them as one example of some of the organizations that provide services for the county through nonprofit entities. HSP, and this would be typical of about a dozen different organizations. Since fiscal year 9, county funding to HSP has gone down $12,680. Now, that number is not particularly important. The idea is, though, that we're talking fiscal year 9 to fiscal year 15, they're actually receiving less funding from the county than they were back then. Our roads budget, and I don't actually have a number for this because since fiscal year 9, we've changed how we're accounting for some things. So when I look at the fiscal year 15 budget, there are things in the number that weren't in it back in fiscal year 9. So I don't know what the number is. But we are putting less money into our roads operating budget in fiscal year 15 than we did back in fiscal year 9. There has been some growth. What little bit of growth we've had has primarily gone to public safety. And when I say growth, I'm not suggesting that they've had anything that you would call unusual growth. What's unusual is they've had some growth and almost everything else hasn't. They kind of stick out for that reason. And when I'm talking about public safety, I'm talking about circuit court, state's attorney's office, detention center, our 911 operations. Again, not huge growth, but one of the few places you look and see that anybody has changed in a noticeable way from fiscal year 9. I haven't gotten to the good part yet, Mike. To make that all work, the commissioners eliminated about 100 positions. And we've added back some of those positions, but not very many. And our ability to provide services has been squeezed. Government is mostly about people providing services. There are some places in our budget where we're buying something. We're buying sand or salt. But we mostly are paying to have people who do something for you. And to their credit, there are a lot of people who have worked very hard in these last 6 years trying to find ways to make things work. But there's only so much that you can do. And any of you, in your own business, if you said, okay, my costs are changing over time, but my revenue is not changing over time, at some point, something has to change. That can't go on forever. We have a mix of services that the county provides and certain levels of service that people have come to expect. The challenge is going to be, how do you maintain that, or if not, what do you change? And I can tell you one thing, the demands for those services are not decreasing. Nobody is expecting less than they were before. People still want the snow to be gone. When their kid goes to the ball field to play, they want the grass to be cut. If you need a permit, nobody wants a permit, but if you need a permit, you want to be able to walk in and get your permit in a reasonable amount of time. All those things take people and the money to have those people to provide those services. Our capital budget is smaller now than it was a decade or so ago. And we're doing little now other than maintaining the infrastructure that we already have. We're not adding very much. There's very little in the way of new initiatives. Now, this is not all bad. There are a couple places where I can point to and say, yes, we're being challenged, but we're doing well. Our road system is in good shape. That's not to say that every road is in the condition we want it to be, and there's probably somebody in this room that says, oh, the road system's in good shape, huh? Come to my house. But if you look at the system as a whole, we're in good shape. And even with the challenges we faced, the last board actually significantly increased funding to our road preservation program. Another area, and this is one that nobody thinks about, stormwater ponds. We have, 150 stormwater ponds, something like that, in the county. This is infrastructure just like other infrastructure. Nobody thinks about it or cares about it, but it's still there and needs to be dealt with. Carroll County has done a remarkable job of taking care of that piece of our infrastructure. And there's a lot that we're dealing with now, EPA and MDE regulations on water quality. In part, we're able to do what we're doing because we've been doing a good job of taking care of stormwater ponds, which are an integral part of that effort. Now, here's one that is not something 10 years ago that I gave any significant thought to, but I've started thinking a lot about it in the last couple of years. And I'm going to give you a number that when I first heard it, absolutely astounded me. And this number is about, when you're in a subdivision, you look over sometimes to the curb and you see that little slot in the curb and a grate, and you have some thought, okay, yeah, well, water goes down there. So you see that, but underneath those streets, there are big pipes running all over the place. They're carrying that water somewhere. And in our more rural areas, if you look carefully as you're driving down the road, you'll see fairly frequently pipes or culverts going underneath the road. Again, water's coming off the road. We're trying to take it somewhere we intend it to be instead of sitting on the road. You add up all those pipes, and we have about 1 million feet of pipes. Now, we spent decades in Carroll County building all this stuff, the 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, there was a lot of development in Carroll County, and we put a lot of this stuff into place. And our focus was on building this stuff, getting it in place. We weren't really that concerned about taking care of it. We were trying to create it. But now, 20, 30, 40 years later, that idea of taking care of it has become a much bigger idea, and why I've been thinking about it a lot these last couple of years. Now, I don't want to leave you the impression that it's been ignored, although in some ways it'd be easy enough. It's kind of, you don't see it, you don't look at it and say, oh, that's broken. But things do get fixed. As we have to deal with a road, we also look at that infrastructure at the same time, and some of it gets repaired or replaced. But there's no comprehensive, how do we take care of this, and how much money does it take to take care of this over time? And that's something we're working through right now. But there's lots of things like that. When you start thinking about, what's the stuff we have? How long is it going to last? What's it going to take to replace it when its time is over? And there's a lot of money out there waiting to be spent to take care of the things that we already have. So we've been all through that, and here we are today. The economy officially emerged from recession some years ago. Do you remember what the year is, Dave?
Mid-year 09.
2009, the recession ended.
The economist said.
2009, from a county government perspective, was basically the start of our problems, and we are not out of them yet. Now, there are a lot of signs that the economy is improving. There are companies posting record profits, stock market is doing well, unemployment is down, we're starting to see the job creation numbers starting to climb, and people look around and say, okay, well, things are getting better. And I get asked often, probably not daily, but probably not too far off it, some version of, things are getting better, right? Or we're back to normal now, right? And just like I disappoint Mike all the time, people seem to be disappointed with my answer to those questions. And what I've been saying to people is, yes, it's better because things aren't getting worse anymore. And there were for a number of years, I couldn't say that. It was, I'm not sure it's not going to get worse than it is today. We're past that, failing some shift in things. But right now, it appears that we're past that. And I understand the disappointment that people have, and sometimes maybe even the disbelief. Oh, there goes Ted again. He just can't say anything happy. But it's not really my intent. I'm just trying to share with people what I see happening. And for many of you here, you've been through recessions and recoveries, and you think back and you say, well, yeah, I remember that recession. Things got bad and then we bounced out. And then I remember this other one, things got bad and then we bounced out. And to me, at least, it's clear that we are not bouncing out of this recession. We haven't, and I don't think we're going to. I think it's going to be a long, slow slog out of this. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But let me explain a little bit about why I think what I think. Back to property tax. Our largest revenue, more than half of our money comes from property tax. The last reassessment was positive. First time in 6 years that we had a positive reassessment. Again, something we've never even remotely seen anything like that before. So that's good. Now, it was positive. It was just a little bit over 4%. So it's a plus, but it wasn't a huge plus. And remember, that growth gets phased in over 3 years in Maryland. So that, I think it was 4.1%, is actually something like 1.3% growth in revenue. So when I'm looking to say, how much money do the commissioners have to build a budget, that 4.1% is irrelevant to fiscal year 16. It's only the 1.3% that comes into play. And now here's why I keep telling, one of the big reasons why I keep telling people it's going to be long and it's going to be slow. When I look at property tax over the next 6 years, I do believe we will continue to get positive reassessments now. So that part's good. But with the kind of growth that we think we can, with reasonable confidence, say to the commissioners, okay, these are numbers that it's fair to work with, not stretching for what we'd like to see or what might happen, but saying, based on whatever evidence we have, here are numbers that we think you can reasonably plan on, and the way that the phase-in works. Remember, this year we have 2 zeros and a 1.3. That's being blended for our revenue change. Next year we'll have 1 zero and 2 increases. A year after that will finally be to 3 positives, all being blended together. But with the estimates we have right now for how property tax will change over those years, when I look out to fiscal year 21, the last year of our 6-year operating plan, we don't yet get to 3% growth in our largest revenue. Now, if I add new construction to that mix, because the reassessments are just looking at what you already have, we can add to our assessable base and our property tax because we built something new. If I add new construction to the mix in fiscal year 21, with what we know today, I'm saying I think we can expect to exceed 3% growth. So more than half of our budget now, 6 years from now, will grow 3%. Income tax is our next largest revenue. Between these two, you have in excess of 80% of all the money that we collect. Now, income tax is always difficult. It changes quickly, changes without any warning, and we don't have anywhere near as much information to work with as we would like. So far this year, the news has actually been good. We have got in more than what we've counted on getting in. The problem for me is I haven't been able to get comfortable how strong a sign that is of what's ahead of us. And part of the problem is, so far we've gotten about a quarter of what we'll receive for the whole year. Next week, we're going to get another distribution that will bring us to about half of what we'll get for the whole year. The other half, we don't see until after the commissioners have made all their decisions on the budget. So that's, I don't lose sleep over things, but if I lost sleep over things, that's one I would lose sleep over. Because, we can take this information and say to the commissioners, with the best information that we have and what we think are reasonable assumptions, here's what we think we're looking at. But that other 50% of the income tax, a third of our budget, could still change. Now, that could be good or it could be bad. It might be better than we've assumed, and I'm not ruling that out. But it could also be worse than we've assumed. And we're a long way down the road before we find that out. And one of the things we're dealing with income tax actually goes back a few years. If you remember calendar year 13, near the end of the year, we were running up against fears of sequestration, the possibility of tax law changes, and me and others like me across the state were saying, people are probably going to pull income, people who can, are going to pull income into calendar year 13. That's going to change how and when we're going to receive money as counties. But remember, we don't have information. We don't get to see what's actually happening back there. All we see is the dollars coming in. So it complicated things a lot. And with what we've seen now since then, we believe we're right. But even now, I mean, we still can't exactly quantify what happened. And it takes 3 fiscal years to get through one tax year. So we're still dealing with some of the lingering effects of choices that people made back in 2013. Our next 2 biggest revenues, and they're not that big, relatively speaking, recordation and our investment income. Recordation is actually growing. Now, this is only, we have a $370 million operating budget, say. We're looking at about $9 million this year, I think. So it's significant, but not a really big piece of the budget. That is growing. And if the housing market heats up, this will grow more quickly, and it will ease some of the pressure on us. Investments, we're getting about 38 cents a year on our investments now. That wasn't, not really, but it's not too far off. But for fiscal year 16, we've actually built in an assumption that interest rates will start to go up, and that will go up some. But we don't know that yet. I'm pretty confident that interest rates are going to go up, but the question is, when is that going to happen? And, we keep waiting for action on the part of the Fed, and it sounds like we're getting closer, but if it doesn't happen in a certain time frame, we're going to have to back away from some of what we've assumed will be available to us in fiscal year 16. Now, turn our minds to the state, as we so often do now. First, very briefly, in this current fiscal year, they made some changes that impacted Carroll County, not Carroll County government so much as some other agencies. One thing that did, in fact, impact the county is what they call program open space. And this, pretty much these days, is the money we use to run our parks capital program. This is how parks happen. The state took back about $250,000 that had already been allocated to Carroll County. And they didn't do it just to us. They went around the state and basically swept up all this money, about $250,000 for us. The community college lost about $250,000. The health department lost about $200,000. These were all in the mid-year changes. Now, as we look ahead to fiscal year 16, Governor Hogan's budget, as presented, there would be a total impact in Carroll County, and I'm talking about Carroll County government, but also school system, community college, library, health department, and the towns. A total impact of about $5 to $6 million. That's a loss of money from the state for all those people. The biggest piece of that is the school system, $4.3 million. The community college loses $400,000. Now remember, they lost $250,000 in 15. I don't remember if I said it or not, but tuition is about $700,000 less than they anticipated. Now this additional $400,000. Program open space changes that we believe we would lose about $3.5 million over the next 5 years. If this comes out this way, this will have significant impact on the projects that are planned for our park system. I didn't see any decreases for agricultural land preservation, but I didn't really find any good information either. And our concern here is program open space is affected by how the state uses their transfer tax. That's where ag pres money comes from as well. So we have some concerns about will ag pres money be there. Now the county is already overwhelmingly the funder of our local ag pres program, but that doesn't mean we wouldn't miss the state money if it disappeared. Highway user revenue, this is interesting. Governor Hogan, this was one of his frequent campaign messages that the state has taken a lot of this state shared revenue away from local jurisdictions. At one time, we were getting about $12 million. We now get about $1 million. But he campaigned on returning that money to local jurisdictions. That's both counties and towns. That was not included in his budget. In fact, there was almost no mention of highway user revenue in the budget at all. Then he did introduce a supplemental budget of $25 million highway user revenue. Now, the interesting thing for our town representatives, this is good news, 19 of that $25 million is earmarked for the towns, $4 million for the counties. That's for all 23 counties. And of course, that's not going to do very much at the county level, and it is not at all in line with how the revenue has historically been shared. So from a county perspective, first, I doubt that the money is coming back. I don't know how the state, even if the state wants to do it, I don't know how they can do it. I don't know where the money's going to come from. But if they somehow do it, is this an indication of how the money's going to be split up in the future? And again, good news for the towns, not so good news for the county, if that's how it plays out. Now, a lot of what the governor has proposed requires legislation to make it happen. A lot of these things, he can't just say, here's what I'm going to do. So there are still question marks on a lot of this. Will the legislation make it through the General Assembly? And if it does, what will it look like once it comes out the other end? And we don't know that. Of course, we're going to be following very closely. But there's a lot of questions here. But the governor's budget was balanced based on an assumption of this legislation passing. So if the legislation doesn't pass, then he doesn't have a balanced budget, and then something else has to happen. What will that something else be? And Again, if did lose sleep over things like this is another one I'd lose sleep over. For a long time now, when the state has a budget problem, local jurisdictions are number one on the list for fixing that problem. So there's some bad in here as proposed for us, but it could be that an alternate solution will be even worse, or maybe there'll be different winners and losers among those of us in Carroll County somehow. So some concerns and challenges, and that by itself probably could fill up the pieces of paper that I have here, but I'm not going to share all of my concerns with you. But the economy and the housing market is clearly at the top of my list. We're making certain assumptions about what's going to happen now. I'm hoping that things are going to be better than what we've counted on, but it has not left my mind the possibility that things will not be as good as we've counted on either. And it's been kind of interesting watching our housing market. It seems like there's a burst of activity. It's okay, here we go. It's starting. Then all of a sudden it gets quiet again. And so it's hard to know what's happening. But one way we watch what's going on, this goes back to our assessment of the reassessments in the future. We compare sale prices of homes that recently sold to their assessment. We're looking to see, okay, are things selling consistently for more than they're assessed for, or the other way around? And we are starting to see a lot of houses selling for more than their assessments. But it's not uniform. It's not everywhere. There are parts of Carroll County where you don't really see much growth at all. And there are other places where you're starting to see, okay, this is changing. South Carroll is the next reassessment area. And in South Carroll, we're frequently seeing 10, 15, 20% over assessments. But we need to be careful and remember that our sample is only the houses that are being sold. It doesn't say anything about a house that hasn't been sold. So while we're feeling comfortable that we're going to see a better assessment in South Carroll, it's still hard to say, well, just how good will that be? Teacher pensions is another concern. Those of you who have listened to me for a few years or have paid attention on your own, that a few years ago, the state passed part of the cost of teacher pensions onto counties. I won't bore you with my rant about the lack of logic that they've used in arriving there, but we are there, and in fact, in fiscal year 16, we'll be in the fourth year of 4 legislated amounts. They told us you'll pay this much in this year, this much in this year, and so on until fiscal year 16. Then the idea is that amount would be rolled into the school system's maintenance of effort, and the counties had no additional responsibility beyond that. I never bought that idea, and in fact, in our planning, we've continued to build some increases, but there are some recent recalculations at the state level that suggest that the bills that the school systems are going to be sent, which up to now have been paid with the money that the counties sent to school systems, are going to be larger, significantly larger than how much money they're getting from the counties. Now, under current law, we have no additional obligation. Now, I'm sure the superintendent would remind us that that doesn't keep us from giving them more money if we would like to, but we have no obligation to do that. But I suspect if things play out the way it looks like they're going to, if somebody in the General Assembly doesn't come up with the idea by themselves, school systems are going to be going to the General Assembly saying, hey, we've got a problem. And it's not hard to imagine that we end up with a law that changes that commitment that we have been planning on so far. And along those lines, other cost shifts. The state sends almost no money to Carroll County government anymore. We get about $2 million a year from the state. Oh, yeah, and the Department of Legislative Services suggested a 36% cut in one of those $1 million, so we'll have to see where that goes. But we don't want to lose $2 million, but that's not our biggest problem now. But just like teacher pensions, the state can pass a law that says, you know what, we used to pay this bill, counties, you're going to pay it tomorrow. This has already happened to us in ways other than teacher pension. And my worry is, what else might they send? And once they get going, how far might they go? Then one very specific concern, and Yeah, I hesitated doing this because I'm not talking about a whole lot of specifics, but this one is potentially big. That's our detention center. Over many years, we have bumped up against and exceeded the capacity of the detention center. Then we'll fall back. We'll have some time where things are okay. But at various times, we have planned for a detention center replacement, a brand new detention center. We've also planned for a minimum security facility that would take certain inmates out of the detention center and relieve some of the pressure. Neither one of those things has happened. Neither one of those things is currently in our plans. Right now, we are renting 15 beds from another jurisdiction, both because we have too many people in the detention center, and also you run into problems of segregating certain parts of the population. Like, for example, this is the easy one. You can't just put women and men into the same piece of the jail. So we're in a situation now where we've actually had to go outside to manage our current problem. This is something that has been on my mind for years. Nothing has made that go away, and eventually, we're going to have to do something about this. What the solution will be, when it will be, I'm not trying to say. Just that it's a big one that's hanging out there over us. So, assuming that you all haven't captured every word that I said, and you're going to go back and share all this with your colleagues, 3 big ideas to walk away with. One, revenue growth remains modest and uncertain. Yes, things are getting better, but it's definitely premature to be, dancing around saying yay. Not that I ever do that. Mike thinks I'm kind of a button-down sort of guy. He always wants me to wear an AC/DC shirt. And I've continued to disappoint him on that, too. Second big idea, we have less flexibility than we once did. Flexibility has pretty much been squeezed out of the budget. Now, there are 2 ways to look at that. There is an argument that can be made. Well, if you had flexibility, that means you had more money than you really needed and you were taxing me too much. I don't entirely agree with that argument, but I understand there's an argument to be made there. The other side, though, is with little flexibility, we have little ability to manage the things that are unexpected. If the revenues don't come in the way we planned, if the state sends us something we didn't plan for, if costs are higher than we planned for. And right now, we're dealing with one of those. This has not been a terrible winter as far as having huge amounts of snow, but we've had a lot of snow and ice events. And roads crews have been out, I don't even know how many times. And every time they go out, I don't know why they keep doing this, but every time they go out, they put salt all over the place. We have to buy that salt. And right now, we have a $1.9 million budget. I think very few people would guess that we spend $1.9 million in snow removal. But right now, we're thinking we're probably going to exceed that. Yeah, and commissioners, we just talked about this in the budget office yesterday, so you haven't heard this yet. But we think we're going to exceed that budget by maybe as much as $800,000. Now, we have a reserve for contingencies, some money that is sitting there so we can handle something like that. So it doesn't create an immediate problem. The thing is, when you're looking at the whole picture and you're looking at the ripple effects into next year, we've limited the room we have for making other decisions as we're moving ahead. And then the third thing, kind of the end result of all the stuff I'm talking about, is growing pressure on the services we provide and our ability to maintain our infrastructure. And that is not intended as a criticism of any choice that's been made. In many cases, we made the choices we needed to make. My point is, after having dealt with the things that happened to us and made the choices that we made, that leaves us in a spot now where we say, okay, can we keep offering that same mix of services? Can we offer that same level of services? I mentioned permits earlier. I forget exactly what the number is, but something like, 92% of permits are issued in the same day. we can continue to do that as long as you have enough people to make that happen. But if you don't, then one of the possibilities is, 85% get done in the first day, or 50% get done in the first day. It's just like, and some of you have heard me talk about snow removal before, I'm sure. The cheapest way to get rid of snow is to let it melt. That costs us nothing. Most people aren't willing to wait. And most people want the snow gone now. And we can make the snow go away very quickly. The question is, how many people and how many trucks are you willing to pay for? Especially when there's, in many cases, you need those trucks to get rid of snow, but you don't need them all the time, but you still have to have the truck. And we can put employees on other things, but how many employees do we have? And roads lost a lot of employees. When I talked about that 100 employees, maybe a quarter of them were from our roads area. Okay, so a little bit of good news in there, just a little bit. Well, nothing new. It's just going back and reviewing. A little bit. Things are not getting worse. They are, in fact, getting better. I've been working very hard, though, to manage expectations and try to keep people from thinking getting better means more than what we really have to go on now. Okay, with that, we can move on to whatever questions you might have. Mike says we have 5 minutes. Yes, David.
Is the detention center full Carroll County residents, or some of those on that federal?
No, we have no more federal prisoners.
Okay, so it's all Carroll County residents.
Yep, all local.
One good thing we can do is just talk to all the residents and tell them to behave themselves.
Sheriff, did you get that?
We would, but we can't fit them anyway.
No, he said you just need to tell people to behave themselves.
Well, I think you've done an excellent job.
Thank you. Hey, Tammy.
The national trend right now is that governments have been deferring their capital improvements for years with the recession, and that a lot of people are expecting there to be a boom in capital or in government building now. Do you guys expect, with a favorable bond market, to do any additional capital improvements in the future years?
Tammy was asking about deferring projects, basically our ability to borrow inexpensive money, and are we going to make use of that? The short answer is probably no. The problem for us is, even though we can borrow inexpensively, and our last bond issue was about 2%, you still need to be able to pay the debt service on the additional money you borrow, and there's really no extra room in the budget. Now, like everything, that's a choice that could be made. We could say, okay, we need to get those projects done, we're going to issue bonds, here's the debt. But we would need some offsetting change somewhere else to be able to do that. Because right now, there's no room to simply absorb additional expenditure. Looks like that's it. Thank you all for coming.
Peggy Soper will have the poison Kool-Aid outside the door for us. No, I'm only kidding, Ted. Just sorry. I had to say that. Ted, this is his 13th and last year speaking. Next year we're going to have a comedian. No, I'm only kidding. It's just, Ted, we do appreciate you coming back all the time. For those that have been through Leadership Carroll, you also know that Ted plays a very integral role in our local government day, and that he coordinates the day. So for all he does for the chamber, the business community, and the citizens of Carroll, let's give him another round of applause. Great job. Just want to thank you all again for being here. Our sponsors, Rager, Lehman & Hauk, and Main Street Advisors. Give them a round of applause again. Also want to thank our friends at the Community Media Center for filming this, streaming it live. They do a great job. Not everybody, unfortunately, can be a chamber member. We have high standards. You have to pay us dues. That was a joke, sorry. But you know, like not everybody can come out and watch TED Talk, but because of these great folks, they can watch it at home. It's being streamed live now, or it's going to be shown, I would imagine, time and time again on local cable or on the internet. We'll have a link up on our website. So for those in the office that couldn't be here, please make sure that gets back to them. I want to thank Lori Blake, our chair. Good job, Lori. Thank you for taking care of things. And Mike Fox, the first time he's been introduced as our immediate past chair. I know he likes that, but Mike, thank you for a great year last year as the chair of the board. All of you should have a sheet like this in front of you. First off, I want to apologize to Mr. Dave Pelican. We spelled his name wrong. That's a cardinal sin. So if you're going to do an internet search for him, it's P-E-L-O-Q-U-I-N. So sorry about that, Dave. But we've got our events that we're going to be having. Our next, 3 or 4 p.m. connections, outstanding teacher awards. Love for you to go ahead and register right now and hand this to Peggy on the way out. It saves you from having to go back and fill it out. Also, you're going to find we're going to have our Small Business Week, March 2nd through the 6th. That's through the Carroll Business Path, and we're proud to be a partner of that. We have Carroll County Economic Development, the actual community college, the chamber, SBDC, or I think that's what they're calling themselves, America's SBDC, I think. And then we've got the Carroll Tech Council, and these events are going to be at the college, so we'd love for you to go to that. Leadership Carroll, we're taking applications right now for it. For those that have ever been through it, you know it's wonderful. For those that haven't been, it's so good. I tell everybody, if you go through the whole year and you don't like it, I will reimburse you 100% of your money back. It's that good. Last year, we filled the class. We had 6 folks on the waiting list. So this year, at this time, we've got like, I think, 10 to 15 folks on the list for it. So if you want to go, let us know in a hurry, and it's up on our website. Last but not least, we're heading back to Cuba. For those that knew we went last year, it was a great trip. We had 40 folks go. This year, we put the email out a couple weeks ago. I've already got 20 deposits in hand, so there's a big interest in that. I have 10 tickets left. If I can add a few more, I will be able to, hopefully, but if you're interested, see me soon. I don't think I've missed any other announcements. Maybe I have. What's that one, Peg?
The Drug and Violence Awareness Expo.
Drug and Violence Awareness Expo. There are some brochures that are like actual sheet next to all of you. If you want to give them a quick word, Peggy.
What we're doing is we're at the Ag Center. We are having, we have six
Peggy, hold on one second. They're bringing a microphone so we can get you.
We have 6 speakers that'll be coming that day to talk about drugs, violence, sexual abuse. We are taking applications for vendor space. The space is free. We have had a tremendous response from the state's attorney's office and the law enforcement. We're going to have the simulated drunk driving experience from McDaniel College there, all kinds of law enforcement vehicles on display, a lot of activities for the kids. We actually have 4 schools that will be busing students to the event to take part in it, to see what's going on. And there'll be demonstrations, K-9 unit, self-defense, and CPR classes. All this is going on all day at the Ag Center from 10 o'clock till 5 o'clock.
Thank you very much. All right, other than that, thank you all again for coming. Ted, thank you, and the meeting's adjourned.